Welcome to Sex with Rebecca, a show geared towards relationships and sexuality that'll help you enjoy your relationships more than you ever thought possible. Today, we'll be talking about maintaining that sexy connection with our very special guest, Dr. Stephen Snyder, author of one of the most acclaimed sex and relationship books of our time, Love Worth Making. Love the title. How to Have Ridiculously Great Sex in a Long-Lasting Relationship. Dr. Snyder is a sex therapist, a relationship therapist, and a sexual medicine specialist who's dedicated his entire career to helping individuals and couples with sex and relationship concerns. Over 30 plus years of experience, he's helped over 1,500 individuals and couples regain closeness and satisfaction in their relationships. So we're very fortunate that today he's all ours. Welcome, Dr. Snyder. Truly honored to be interviewing you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thrilled to be here.
I have to say, I'm just as excited as our audience to hear your words of wisdom. Let's start off with, maybe you can start us off by sharing the primary reasons that couples lose their erotic connection in long-term relationships.
Well, as you know, in sex therapy, we talk about two kinds of problems that couples have. One is remote problems and the other is immediate problems. Mm-hmm. Remote problems are things like you hated your mother or you hated your father and deep psychological things which have an influence on couples. Mm-hmm. The immediate problems usually have to do with the fact that they don't understand really what sex is supposed to be all about. I'll give you an example. I'll be talking to a man and I'll say, when you touch your wife's body, are you touching her body for her pleasure or yours? And he'll say, well, for hers, of course. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? And I go, no, dummy. It's for your pleasure. Because if it's touching for your pleasure, then there's passion in it. Mm-hmm. So the primary thing that people don't understand is that sex is not about giving your partner pleasure. You get really misled if you look at most books and magazine articles on the subject, because they're all have to give your partner the most wonderful pleasure or the most wonderful climax, and it totally misses the point. The point of good sex is to enjoy your partner, because if you're enjoying them, they're going to feel that, and that's fundamentally what everybody wants, is to be enjoyed. It makes us feel good about ourselves.
I think that's wonderful that you say, because lots of times my clients will say to me, he or she doesn't give me an orgasm. And I say, it's not given, it's taken.
Exactly.
So I like the way you framed that. And can you comment quickly, you were talking about some of the family of origin stuff. How does that impact our sexuality when you're talking about the remote?
The remote often has to do with the fact that sex is regressive. Mm-hmm. So when people get sexually aroused, it's part of the arousal process. You become a little more childish, a little more immature. And if there's stuff from your growing up that you had conflicts about, that stuff tends to come out. Mm-hmm. Conflicts about being childish or immature, conflicts about giving and receiving, and all sorts of other stuff that has to do with your primary people of origin, who obviously are all still in our heads, chattering away inside our heads, although we don't always identify exactly who's talking at any given time.
Especially when we're in bed. I remember a Woody Allen movie where there's the couple in bed, and then either side of them they have their parents. So there's 6 people in bed. So I think that kind of captures what you just
exactly
said.
Captures. It's been said that there's never fewer than 6 people in bed at any given time.
Exactly. And nowadays when people have, serial monogamy or other arrangements where they have multiple partners over a lifetime, I guess we're bringing all of that in as well. So a very sensitive subject. Now,
it's a very sensitive.
Yes. One of the issues with heterosexual couples can be not understanding what the other gender is all about, particularly between the sheets. So can we tackle that next, please?
Thrilled. Let's do it.
So what are the main things that men still don't understand about women?
Okay. What they don't understand is that what women want is they want to feel desired. Mm-hmm. They want to feel, if possible, irresistible. And they want to experience that their partner has passion for them. Mm-hmm. Men really don't understand that. What they think women want is what they're told in the magazines that women want, which is to give them a wonderful orgasm and to touch them exactly how they like to be touched. And a man tries to do that, and he often ends up boring his partner to death because he's just trying to do a good job, like he's going to get a good grade or something. That women can't stand that. No hero in a romance novel ever rips off the woman's clothes and then says, okay, now tell me how you like to be touched. I mean, it's nice to know. But what they really want is a woman generally wants to, well, let me put it to you this way. The operative word that I hear from most heterosexual women in my office, although it's a tiny bit politically incorrect, I say, well, what do you really want in bed? They go, I want to surrender. I've been busy thinking all day long and taking care of things all day long. I want a little bit like dancing. I want him to ask me to dance, lead me, twirl me around, and let me just turn off my mind and just surrender to somebody who's worthy of surrendering to.
There's got to be a lot of truth to that, and I guess that's why 50 Shades, it took off in such a big way, multiple print runs, because, you know, it's all about surrender, but it's also the flip side is that he's taking charge of making the decisions. Every detail is meticulously planned out. So I like the way you put that. And some guys are so invested in the almighty orgasm that if a woman doesn't have an orgasm, they take it personally. And yet for her, it's just that experience. You want me, you desire me, you got to have me. Right.
For most women, that's more important than orgasm.
Absolutely.
If you give most women a choice, somebody give you a great orgasm versus somebody who just can't keep his hands off you and seems worthy of doing that, most women will take the latter.
Absolutely, hands down. And a lot of women will say that the whole experience, they look at orgasm, I'm not knocking it, it's a fun experience, but it's a few seconds of, twitching and making funny faces.
And who can remember? Who can remember what they feel like afterwards?
But what led up to it, the aperitif, that's the really important piece.
Exactly.
So what's the most important mistake that men make in bed in light of some of the stuff you've shared?
The most important mistake is to try and give their partner an orgasm. I always say there are two roads to orgasm. There's the high road and the low road. The low road is where you're really not that turned on. You haven't lost enough IQ points to be turned on. You're not dumb and happy enough to be turned on.
Right.
And yet, if you get the right friction in the right spot, you can squeak out a climax. Okay, whatever. Nobody's going to go home and say that was wonderful sex.
Right.
The high road is a little bit like a great restaurant.
Right.
You've got the appetizers, and they're so good that you forget that you have an entree coming. And then the entree comes, and you go, entree for most couples is intercourse, but it doesn't have to be. Entree comes, and you think, wow, I forgot, we're going to get an entree too. Oh, terrific, let's do that too. And then you're almost full, and the dessert tray rolls around, and you go, oh my God, we get to have dessert too. I love this place. So orgasm is dessert. It just means, usually it means it's kind of over, and next thing is, you get your code and the check and hail a cab if you're in Manhattan. So the thing that most couples make a mistake of is just trying to get dessert as quickly as possible. And to use the analogy, afterwards they're still hungry because it didn't really take them someplace special. So
the goal-oriented piece, it is like you described, like the first way. I mean, that's why they make menage a moi. That's why we have masturbation if you just want to get off, point A to point B to point C. But it's the experience and just, being there for each other and enjoying each other through the various courses. But we just focus intercourse in between the courses, I suppose. And we lose that beautiful feeling, that beautiful connection. And then it's so empty afterwards, because if the orgasm is the goal, then once it's done, that's it. It's game over. People de-goo, they turn over, they go to sleep, or whatever. And there isn't that connection where you're just lying in each other's arms thinking about what just happened.
Furthermore, it gets boring. And a lot of times when couples say that sex has become boring, it's because they've been taking the low road.
Absolutely.
So the mistake is to take the low road and not to focus on your actual state of arousal. This is something we haven't talked about yet. Few people really focus on their state of arousal when they're having sex. So one of the first things I do in my book is I say Masters and Johnson studied the physical aspects of arousal for about 10 years in the 50s and 60s, but nobody's ever really cataloged the emotional parts of arousal. So what I do in chapter 1 of my book, I catalog the emotional parts of arousal. There's no research on this because it's subjective. You can't research it. So I just talked to lots of people and made the rest up, but I've field tested it with a lot of couples. And part 1 is that you get absorbed in the experience. Phone rings, you don't really care who's calling. You just want them to go away. That means you're aroused. Part 2 is you regress. You become a little more childlike, demanding, not quite so considerate, a little more selfish. You may be very involved with your partner, but you don't really want to hear about their day. You just want them to make nice noises and tell you everything's wonderful. One might say the sexual mind. Yeah, somebody would say the sexual mind is like a 2-year-old. You know, it just wants to put on a nice hat and eat lots of ice cream and have everybody go, yay. So it really functions on that level. And then the third part of being authentically psychologically aroused is that you feel deeply validated. Right. You feel, yes, okay, no question. This has its own inherent validity. This is really where I live. Thank you so much. Yes, this is me.
Now that's memorable stuff that you're talking about. It's really exciting, and I want to get more into some of the other stuff that your book covers, because in my own client base, there's lots of stuff that you talk about that I'm sure will help them. So let's switch from men to women for a bit. What are the main things women still don't understand about men?
Okay, here's the big one. You know how women need to be desired? Men need to feel welcomed. Most men who are in sexually dysfunctional marriages don't feel welcomed. The woman says, "You never jump on me anymore." There's no music going on that says that she welcomes him. To take a somewhat dated image, Playboy magazine always had a centerfold. And it was somebody with a rockin' hot body and so forth. Her hair was perfect and everything. But the biggest part about the centerfold was she had this smile that said, "Oh, it's you. I'm so happy to see you. Thank you so much for buying this magazine. You just make me feel so good when you turn the page and look at me." Now, obviously, no real woman is going to feel that way all the time. But that's the thing that guys usually seek. Because remember, sex is very infantile. It's like on a 2-year-old level. They want to be told that the woman is really, really happy to see them.
So wants them.
Exactly. Well, not only wants them, but she's happy to see them. Most men don't need to feel desired like a woman needs to feel desired. They just need to feel welcomed. They need to feel that his desire for her is welcomed by her. So what tends to get in the way is men don't handle women's disappointment very well. Men are very, very upset about disappointing their partners. And often a man will withdraw if he feels his partner is disappointed, especially if he feels she's disappointed in him. And the reason is that most men don't have the kind of intimate experience like women have in middle school and high school of having girlfriends and talking with them and having ups and downs in the relationship and misunderstandings, and it's okay to disagree, and we had a bad day, we had a fight, and now we're friends again. Men don't go through any of that stuff. So they're in a relationship with a woman who's a pro at that, and she goes, "I'm really disappointed in you." And he goes, "Oh my God, this is terrible. It's like everything's over between us." So he retreats. And she doesn't understand the fact that he retreats. And it makes her even more upset. So now she looks even more disappointed in him. And the whole thing really goes to hell. That's the classic knot that couples get into, when it has to do with when a woman is disappointed. Men don't handle that very well. And they really need to be taught it's okay. She can feel disappointed. It's not the end of the world.
It isn't the end of the world. But I think you're right. You're very enthusiastic. You're excited to see me. That's such a big one. I have many, many clients where, because they tend to do all the initiation, they say, "I wish that she would just greet me with a big smile one day at the door and initiate, because that tells me that she's excited about it. And it's not that she's just, performing a duty or just kind of tagging along with what I want." So a really important point. What's the most important mistake that women make in bed?
Most important mistake that women make is probably rushing through it. Woman knows that she's not very excited. She knows this is something that her partner kind of wants or needs. She says, "I kind of do it, just go inside me and, climax and get it over with." And she rushes through it. And that becomes a pattern after a while. And after a while, she really has no desire at all. At that point, she doesn't know what to do, because she has no desire at all, and so she panics and she feels like there's something terribly wrong. She may end up not wearing anything sexy to bed because she's afraid of exciting his desire, because women have this mistaken idea that if they excite a man's desire, they're responsible for doing something about it. For instance, if they're responsible for a man getting erect, that they're responsible for relieving him of that erection, which is a mistake. Guys don't mind being erect. We actually like it. It's a good feeling, and it's not an affliction at all. And guys know what to do if they have an erection and they need to do something about it. So just because she gets them erect, it doesn't mean she's responsible for delivering a climax to him. And often it's good to make that explicit, to say, I know you're excited, but I don't really want to have sex right now. Can we just simmer a little bit, just enjoy arousal for its own sake, which we're going to talk about in the next segment. But most women don't know that.
And that's a really valid point. Lots of times, like just this week, I saw a couple where she was even afraid of hugging him because she thought it would lead to an erection and then she'll have to take care of that erection. And he said, look, I'm 60, I'm getting a boner, I'm really excited about it. You don't even have to do anything with it. The fact that I can get it, it's a really, really big deal for me. And like
it's a happy thing for a guy.
It's a happy thing.
And I have clients who are experienced therapists, and I'll tell them this, a woman, if she gives a man an erection, she doesn't have to relieve him of it. And they're shocked. They didn't know.
So when it comes to differences, another question that you and I frequently hear is, how often should a couple be having sex? I guess when it comes to that, it's hard to gauge what the Joneses are doing. I mean, harder still to understand that we needn't keep up with them, so to speak. So can you speak to that next, please?
Absolutely. Well, statistics say that the average couple is having sex less often than they used to. It used to be in the 60-something times per year, and now in the internet era, it's in the 50-something time per year. So slightly less than once a week for most couples. Unfortunately, that's not a really good mark, and it's not enough to keep an erotic relationship going. Most sex therapists feel that about once a week is the absolute minimum for keeping an erotic relationship going long term. If you're doing it much less than that, you start to feel like siblings to each other, which has its own unerotic thing. And you hear a lot from couples. So what I suggest for couples to do is and we'll talk about this a little later, they make a point of getting excited together even when they're not going to have sex. So I don't like couples to count the number of times the penis went in the vagina and they both had climaxes. I like them to count the number of times where they got really stupid together. So, for instance, if they get really stupid together for a minute kissing before one leaves for work, I count that. If they get really stupid together before they both fall asleep for a minute, I count that as well. So it's not just the sex, it's the number of times you get really aroused together.
So these are all the erotic moments. Great stuff, Dr. Snyder. Wait until you find out about simmering. Still ahead. It'll blow your mind, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Sex with Rebecca, a show where we bring you expert advice on important matters to help your relationships be more intimate, exciting, and emotionally fulfilling. In this segment, we'll be talking about simmering with our very special guest, Dr. Snyder, all the way from the Big Apple. Dr. Snyder, in your book, Love Worth Making, How to Have Ridiculously Great Sex in a Long-Lasting Relationship, you talk about simmering, a concept I find absolutely fascinating. So perhaps you could begin this segment by telling us what exactly is simmering.
Okay. Simmering is getting excited with no expectation that anything is going to happen. It's just sexual excitement. I use a mnemonic FIOS, F-I-O-S, like Verizon FIOS. It's for its own sake. Sexual excitement just because sexual excitement is a good thing. A lot of couples make the mistake of thinking that sexual excitement is like an affliction. When you have it, you have to just relieve yourself of it immediately. In fact, you can just cultivate it for its own sake because it feels good. So, classic example of simmering, sexual excitement for its own sake. Two teenagers, boyfriend and girlfriend, they have 3 minutes between class. They're excited to see each other. They meet at one of their locker. They hold each other, feel each other's bodies, inhale the scent of each other's hair, breathe together, get a little bit dumb and happy together, and then the bell rings and they dart off in opposite directions to their classes feeling just a little buzzed and unable to concentrate on their class for the next 10 minutes. That's simmering. Teenagers know how to do that. Yeah, teenagers know how to do that. It's where we all start, basically, because we don't have privacy or time and so forth. Any married couple can do the exact same thing. Instead of kissing your spouse goodbye in the morning, which takes a second, simmer them goodbye. It takes a minute. Generate some electricity.
Just
enjoy the electricity.
There.
Absolutely. absolutely. And then kiss them goodbye and leave just with a little bit of a buzz on.
I like
Because
that
that's what
idea.
arousal should do to you. Should keep you a little hungry. And I always get asked, well, isn't that frustrating? I go, yes, in the best possible way.
Because it has you thinking, it has you longing for more.
Yeah, exactly. Who wants to extinguish one's desire every time one experiences it? No, just let it hang around a little.
Let it hang around. Sounds good. Many of my clients, I'm liking what you're saying. They're stuck in that territory where neither party isn't willing to initiate any kind of physical affection. Like you said, it would be okay if he gets an erection. I have to do something about it.
Exactly.
So they're afraid of what it might or might not lead to. Because I see the flip side as well, where a partner says that, my partner just tries to arouse me and then they pull back. And so I can't even allow myself to get excited because I'm really worried that how you're talking about that buzz and feeling silly, that I'm raring to go and my partner has no interest in moving forward. So the flip side can be frustrating for some people too. So how exactly is simmering different from, say, an overture like cuddling?
Okay, so before we get to cuddling, which is one of my favorite topics, let me talk about something else you said, which is my partner tries to arouse me. I believe it's categorically a mistake to ever try to arouse your partner. The thing to do is to enjoy your own arousal with your partner and let your partner enjoy their arousal. When you're trying to arouse your partner's body is registering, he's trying to arouse me. Is this going to work or is it not? Am I going to get wet? Am I going to get hard? Too much thinking going on. What you want is for your partner to just be aroused and enjoying themselves. Then you can do whatever the hell we want.
I think that's great because, whether we're looking at performance anxiety, where also, just like any other stressful activity, cortisol goes up, your blood vessels start to constrict.
Yeah,
and
it's totally antithetical to arousal.
Yeah, but if we're focusing...
Yeah, we're on the same page.
If we're focusing on ourselves and, feeling good, then we don't have to be worried about the outcome because that's happening inside our bodies.
Exactly. Again, as we talked about in the first segment, we want to focus on our own arousal. Am I really losing IQ points? Am I really having a feeling this is taking me someplace special? So now let me get to cuddling. Cuddling, can't stand it. Couples do way too much cuddling. They're sitting watching the TV and sitting maybe holding hands or something, and there's no sexual current passing between them. I'd prefer that they sit on separate couches unless they're going to actually exchange some sexual electricity, because it just gets you used to your partner as a cuddle partner. It's just no good. Don't like cuddling at all.
So you're talking about building that sort of that erotic tension. Esther Perel talks about that too, that just having that little bit of distance, so that creates a craving instead of, you've got your oxytocin and there's like you're satiated.
Exactly. It's a waste of time if you ask me, but I'm very biased because I'm a sex therapist, but I can't stand cuddling.
Great information, Dr. Snyder. When we return, we'll be getting into male and female erotic differences and how to keep desire going. I know you'll want to stick around for that. Welcome back to Sex with Rebecca, a show geared towards making your relationships the best that they can be, both in and out of the bedroom. In this segment, as promised, we'll be talking about orgasms, among other things, with Dr. Snyder, author of Love Worth Making, How to Have Ridiculously Great Sex in a Long-Lasting Relationship. I absolutely love that title. Who wouldn't want to have ridiculously great sex? If you're into sex, that is, which I hope you are. So tell me, what inspired you to write this wonderful book?
Well, I've been a sex and relationship therapist for just about 30 years now, and I got very frustrated because I couldn't find any book to give my clients, patients to read that really had in it what I thought they needed to know. There was a lot of stuff about technique. There was a lot of stuff about society and a lot of stuff about kink and all sorts of sexual novelties. But there was nothing about feelings. And I decided that was the big gap. The big gap was sexual feelings. There was nothing about the actual emotions of what actually goes on in your head when you're having great sex. And so I began to catalog that and think about that. And as I mentioned, it's in chapter 1 of my book, kind of an outline that's been field tested in the office with over 1,000 patients of what actually goes on in your head when you're having great sex. Just to recap, You're totally absorbed in the experience. You're regressed to a somewhat more childlike and immature level. And you have a feeling of validation of, yes, that's me. That's where I really live. So to put simply, you want it to take you someplace really special and to make you feel, one might say, dumb and happy. If you're getting there, then you're doing it right.
You're doing it right. I think every great book is born that way. When you think, I don't have anything to offer to my clients, then you know that there's a gap there, there's a space there that needs to be filled. And 1,000 clients, that's a pretty good end. That's a huge population. So I think...
And you and I both know that the bad news, if you can't find a book that you need, is that you got to write it yourself.
Absolutely. That's how my ideas came to being as well. But, 1,000 clients, that's a pretty good sample size. So very, very excited about all the stuff that you've discovered and you're willing to share with us. Now, what are the highlights that our audience can look forward to when they purchase the book, which they must?
Oh, thank you. Well, we talked earlier about simmering, which is desire and arousal without sex. Later in the book, we talk about what I call the TwoStep, which is sex without desire, because that's the big question in long-term couples. I mean, the holy grail of sex therapy is how to keep desire alive in a long-lasting, committed relationship, because let's face it, it tends to wane because you don't have the novelty and various other things get in the way, and there's domesticity and all that other stuff. So most books, this is something that really troubled me, talked about how to keep it novel in some kind of way. Go out to dinner and sit at the bar and pretend you don't know each other, or, some surprising or different thing, role play in some way. And I thought to myself, that's just so artificial. It's like you're trying to trick your sexual mind. I don't like that. I also found it didn't really work. 50 Shades of Grey sold 100 million copies, and it got a lot of women very, very excited for 2.5 weeks. And then everything settled back to normal. Sexual mind just does not groove on novelty for more than about 2.5 weeks. Then it wants something else and says, what have you done for me lately? It's like trying to keep a kid happy by buying it lots of new toys. You're not going to make the kid any happier in the long run. You're just going to end up exhausting yourself. So I thought to myself, what do we really do if we really want to make our inner sexual kid happy? Well, first of all, like with any kid, you want to show it proper limits. You want to say, okay, this is okay, but sleeping with your neighbor is not. It's just not yours. It's fine. What you really need is you need a way of accessing that feeling of regression and validation. And I began to turn to the mindfulness idea, as a lot of sex therapists have been doing. I have a colleague on the West Coast in Vancouver, Lori Brotto, who also wrote a great book on sex and mindfulness based on her research. And I came up with a technique that I call the TwoStep. It's an alternative to the sex date. Problem with the sex date, obviously, you're going to have sex Thursday night at 8 o'clock. Thursday night at 8 o'clock, take off your clothes, you go to bed, and neither of you are in the mood. You've got a dinner reservation and neither of you are hungry. So it's a recipe for bad sex. Instead, what I like a couple to do is to make a date, 8 o'clock Thursday, we're going to take off our clothes, go to bed, and do absolutely nothing. So this is a mindfulness technique. That's step one. We're going to do nothing. And we're not even going to get that involved with each other. We're just going to tune in. We're going to tune up our own instrument. So we're going to breathe, and each of us is just going to have our own separate experience. And we're going to feel our body in bed, the temperature, the way our body contacts the mattress, how these things feel. We're going to scan through our body, see what's going on. And then maybe if we feel like it, we might talk to our partner a little bit, just listen to what they have to say, not get involved in any deep conversation, but just cultivate awareness or mindfulness or whatever one might want to talk about. And then at that point, you have what you need to begin to have sex, because you've been able to turn off your mind. You've tuned in to really where you are. You can feel where you're at, and you know where you need to go in order to access that psychological state of arousal. So it's very self-determined. So it's very different from the novelty approach. It's kind of the anti-novelty approach. It says novelty is going to wear off. This is not going to wear off. This is something that you can do week after week, and it deepens over time, because every time one does a mindful experience, it's different. You're in a different state of mind. You're a different person. Your partner is a different person. And if you access that state of mind where you can really tune into the subtleties of that, then sex becomes a whole wider realm.
And I guess that's why mindfulness is is becoming more and more relevant in a lot of the work that we do. There's this level of attunement into the self and what we're feeling. And you've been saying this all along, that it's about, turning ourselves on too. So it kind of dovetails into that beautifully. Now, you've talked a lot about turn-ons, turning ourselves on primarily. How about turn-offs? You mentioned that neediness or clinginess can be a turn-off. What's the deal there?
Well, it's not only neediness or clinginess. There's a whole constellation of things that men do that turn women off because they're perceived as unmasculine. So, in bed, if a man is silly, that's a turnoff for most women. A woman could be as silly as she wants, but for a man to be silly in bed, it's a turnoff. If a woman is indecisive in bed, that's not a turnoff. If a man is indecisive in bed, that's a turnoff. If a woman is passive, that's not a turnoff, as long as she's got a rockin' hot body and she turns him on. If a man is passive in bed, that's a turnoff. If a man is needy or needs reassurance, that's a turnoff. So masculinity is an interesting construction. It's a lot more limiting than femininity. Women ordinarily have the ability to do whatever they're going to do, and nobody's going to tell them it's not feminine. However, a man has a narrow role in terms of what's masculine. So within what I call in my book the conventional script for heterosexual mating, men are expected to do certain things. They're supposed to take the initiative. They're supposed to know what they're doing. Christian Grey, he takes Anna into his red room of pain, and he knows exactly what he wants to do there. He doesn't have to ask her, where are my mid-size anal beads or anything like that. He knows exactly where they are. He's going to pick them up. He's going to do it. And she could just surrender. That's what women mostly want. So men have to act a role. I say in the book, it's a little politically incorrect, eroticism in women seems to be a matter of being. A woman doesn't necessarily have to do anything to turn a man on. You look at the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. Women in bathing suits or next to naked. And what are they doing? They're doing nothing. They're doing absolutely nothing at all. So a woman in a state of pleasurable relaxation is a big turn on. A man in a state of pleasurable relaxation is not a turn on for most women. They want to know, okay, what's he going to do? There was a Playboy magazine for women a long time ago. It was called Playgirl magazine that showed hot-looking guys in states of pleasurable relaxation completely naked. No woman bought it. It was supported for decades, but it was bought by gay men because those are the only people who were interested in looking at a hot guy who's not doing anything. Most women want to see a guy doing something. Even in 50 Shades of Grey, he has muscles. He's actually just doing dips and all sorts of acrobatic stuff, and he's playing the piano, and he's driving his helicopter, and he's doing all sorts of stuff. She doesn't have to do anything. So men within the conventional script of heterosexual mating are expected to act with confidence, decisiveness. Interestingly, they're expected to show leadership. Leadership is very, very sexy for most women. So somehow between whatever's innate and whatever's culturally driven, men have these very scripted roles that they're expected to enact. So if a man deviates from those roles, that causes anxiety for everybody. Now, I'm not saying that's a great state of affairs, but that's what I see in the office. A man, say, who has a dominant streak, who likes to be in control, as long as he's not domineering and as long as he's not an abuser, most women can kind of get into that. They get into that. Christian Grey, 100 million copies. A man who has a submissive streak, who may want a woman to take control and take charge and dictate what he's going to do, that man is going to have a hard time getting a date because there's not many women that want to do that. Usually he'll have to pay for it if he wants somebody to do that. So men's roles are very, very scripted. And it's not just neediness, but it's anything that smacks of immaturity or lack of leadership. One might say in the traditional gender roles in the conventional script for heterosexual mating, women are allowed to regress and to enact as immature an act as they want. They can do baby talk, they can giggle, they can pout, they can do whatever they want. Men can't do that. They can't regress as much. They have to maintain leadership position.
So lots of pressure on men, whereas with women, it's just a matter of a state of being. Wow, you've told us so many amazing things. Thank you so much, Dr. Snyder, for all your sizzling insights. I can see
Well, thank you
myself
for having
simmering
me. It's a
already.
pleasure.
Thank you, and I hope our audience will grab a copy of your remarkable book. Thank you, viewers, for joining us. Be sure to join us again, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on missed episodes, to watch your favorite shows again, and to access great tips for keeping it hot and intimate. I'm Rebecca Rosenblatt, your host, wishing you happy, healthy, and passionate relationships. Until next time.